Here we go, here we go. Good morning, good morning. There's people coming in. Hello, Dorinda, Marcel, Charles, Betty, Christine, good morning. Good morning, Colleen. Hello, Jackie Gale. I got your message about Ty. He is headed home. Thank the Lord for that. Hello, Sally. Good morning, Vicki. Good morning, Terry. Howdy, Dan.
Howdy.
Let's see, there's 3 of them mixed in there together at one time. Good morning, Jill. Hello, Sharon. Hello, Jeff Rowe. I like saying Jeff Rowe because it sounds like Jethro. Good morning, Angie. Sanja. Holly. All right, folks are coming on in. Linda Grimes, good to see you. Janie, turn your volume down, Jan. Connie and Steve. All right. Good morning, Jeannie Howard. Hello, Travis Grindle. Good morning, Jean. Good morning, Carolyn. All right, lots of folks coming in today. Hello, Christy. Good to see you this morning. Larry and Deborah Jones, welcome. All right, if you have any prayer requests, be sure and give those to us. There's Jan. Make sure you let us know about those prayer requests. I just mentioned Ty. That's a young boy that had an accident. We've been praying for him for quite a while, and thankfully got good news today that he's coming home. Good morning, Judy and Butch. Good morning, Gail and Danny. I think I missed a couple of them while I was talking. Hello, Brian Petrie. I think I missed a couple of you when you came in. Hello, Josh and Aaron Neal. Hello, Annie and Sherman. Paul. Good to see you this morning. Curtis. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As you come in, David Alton, welcome. As you come in, I want you to fill out a card and turn it in. We're having a drawing. We're going to give away a hunting trip for 2. So just fill out the card that's in there in your pew, and then hand it to the usher who'll come by here in a few moments. Dorinda and I are going to give away a hunting trip, and we'll be your personal guide on this hunting trip, so be sure to fill out your card and turn it in. Trust me, it'll be the best snipe hunting trip you've ever been on. All right, so that's quite a joke, right? Anybody ever been snipe hunting? Mm-hmm. Yep. You know what I'm talking about. Good morning, George. All right, let me let you know what's going to be happening next week, because it's going to be a little bit different. Good morning, Elwanda. Good morning, Dave and Vicki. Hello, Dottie and Bob. Next week's going to be different. Next Sunday's going to be different. We're going to be in Snyder, Texas, speaking at a beast feast, which is kind of like a wild game dinner. It'll be a men's meeting on Saturday night at Calvary Baptist Church in Snyder, Texas. My good friend and pastor Matt Lowry has invited me to come and speak there for a beast feast. And Brother Matt he's one of my favorite people. He just absolutely cracks me up with some of his antics. In fact, the poster that he put out for the Beast Feast for his church, when it said the guest speaker, it said Lake Fork fishing expert Perry Crisp. Now, number one, nobody's an expert on Lake Fork. and number two, I'm far from it. So I said, brother, you're going to need to change that. He said, well, you fished it more than I have, so you're better than I am at it, so that makes you an expert. So anyway, I told him I'm going to keep that poster just in case any of my friends give me any trouble. I can tell them, look here, it says right here, I'm an expert. Good morning, Lucille. Let's see, who else came in while I was talking? Bobby B. Avenue, good to see you today, brother. So next Sunday's going to look different because after I preach or speak to that men's group on Saturday night, then I'm going to preach at Calvary Baptist Church in Snyder on Sunday morning. The service will be an hour prior to what we normally do. It'll be at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. And Dorinda is going to have my phone, and she's going to do the Facebook Live from the Perry Phrase page, or at least we're planning on that. But if I were you, I would go to Calvary Baptist Church Snyder. I would go to their Facebook page and like their page, and then next Sunday be ready to go to their page at 10:30 because it'll be on their page as well on Facebook Live, and it'll be a more direct camera shot than we don't have any idea where Dorinda's going to be set up for that. So either way, just wanted you to know about that. Again, it'll be an hour earlier than the time that we are typically here, so it'll be 10:30 instead of 11:30. I know Dorinda told me that I put 22:30 on my advertisement this morning. I don't. That's not military time. It was just I hit the 2s instead of the 1s, so it should be 11:30. I've corrected it since, but it may be a little bit late. But anyway, you're here. We're here. We're glad you're here. Again, this week we will send you some reminders about this change as we get closer to next Sunday. If this is your first time with us, thanks for watching. Welcome home. Make yourself at home, sit back, put on your spiritual headphones, get ready to hear about a global war that you won't hear about in the news. And it's a war that is surprisingly close to home. Welcome to Perry Phrase. My name is Perry Crisp. I'm a pastor and writer from Lake Fork, Texas. I became a churchless pastor last November, and before I could connect with a pastorless church, the coronavirus hit. So I've been basically quarantined since last November. And if you think you're stir crazy, just imagine how my wife feels being stuck with me. But actually, it's really been a blessing for us. We have had some just really amazing times with the Lord. By the way, speaking of Dorinda, she normally would be making her appearance on camera today, but she's not. She is here listening. But she's not on camera today. She has her arms full with grandchildren and garage sales. So that's what she's doing. She's with our daughter, hitting every garage sale she can possibly find. So anyway, this unusual season of life is, as I've described it, it's an opportunity disguised as a crisis. And it allows me to use what God's given me to share with you. And so every week, since we don't know what to call this, we make up a new name for ourselves. And so today, we're just going to call ourselves the Well-Dressed Fellowship, where the wardrobe of warfare is the clothing of choice. Are you wearing the wardrobe of warfare today? Are you appropriately clothed in the battle gear of the Christian soldier? If you're not sure what I'm talking about when I use this kind of language, what I'm going to try to do in this message is to bring this whole wardrobe thing into focus today. Because it's vitally important that you and I gear up every day without leaving a single piece of battle gear in our prayer closets. So today's message is titled, Don't Bring a Casserole to a Sword Fight. As Baptists, we're good at bringing casseroles to everything. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Well, this is like that, but for Christians, because, as we're going to look at, we need to wake up, wise up, suit up, stand up, pray up, and speak up. Whether we realize it or not, folks, we are in a war. We are at war. There is a very real ongoing battle and a very real combative enemy. And because I'm going to be speaking about that battle and about that enemy today, it would not surprise me whatsoever for this broadcast to get interrupted, for something unusual to happen, because the enemy does not want anyone to hear this message. Some people treat the Christian life like it's a day at the beach. It is, if that beach is Normandy. You know what happened at Normandy, right? Thousands of American soldiers died on the beaches of Normandy in World War II. German soldiers were lined up along the steep cliffs while American soldiers were like sitting ducks, totally vulnerable as they landed on the beaches and were gunned down. You say, well, boy, you're being overly dramatic today concerning this spiritual warfare. I don't think I'm being overly dramatic at all. I think that we are all so deceived by our enemy that we have learned to think very little about this battle that's taking place 24/7. There are no hammocks on a battlefield, and yet far too many Christians are lounging around like it's a day at the beach. We may not take this battle very seriously, but I guarantee you our enemy takes this battle very seriously. And so this week, as I've been studying Ephesians 6 and even 2 Corinthians chapter 10, a haunting question has been nagging at my spirit all week, all weekend. And that question is this: do I take the enemy as seriously as he takes me? One thing you will hear about on the news every day is a different enemy, but it's similar to the enemy we're talking about. This enemy has several names. Names you're tired of hearing about: COVID-19, coronavirus, China virus, and some less flattering choice words that people have given to it that I'm not going to repeat here. And so there are similarities between the coronavirus and the spiritual forces of our enemy. Our enemy also has several names, just like COVID-19 has several names. So does our enemy. The Bible gives him at least 30 different names. Some of those names are Satan, the devil, the serpent, the dragon, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and the father of lies. Another similarity between the two enemies is that they're both invisible, at least to us. Folks, listen, there's more going on around us than what we can see. And that's true even in the physical world. I mean, you know there is such a thing as wind, but you can't see the wind. You can see the effects of the wind, but you can't actually see the wind. You can't see gravity either, but hopefully you have a healthy fear of gravity. It's that healthy fear of gravity that keeps you from climbing skyscrapers or skydiving without a parachute. It's invisible, but it's real. COVID-19 is invisible, but it's real. It can be in your body or in mine without us knowing it. It can walk right into your living room through a trusted friend, and you'd never know it. It's an invisible enemy. So is the devil, and so is his hierarchy of demonic, wicked forces. You know, it's interesting to me, the measurements that we'll take to avoid a virus that we have a 10% chance of getting infected with, and a 2% chance of dying if infected on average. Yet every single one of us, 100% of us, have been infected by the devil's poison of sin. And since death came into the world by sin, we all die, 100% of us. But we're more aware of and we're more proactive against the invisible enemy of our lungs than we are the invisible enemy of our souls. We should be aware of and proactive against both. You know, there's another interesting similarity between these two. It has to do with our defenses against these two invisible enemies. Before COVID-19 ever came onto the scene, most of us had never heard, unless you're in the military or unless you're in the medical field or whatever, most of us have never heard of PPE. Personal protective equipment. I never heard of that before, but now it's common lingo. But it wasn't common lingo a year ago. And it was about a year ago, somewhere in there, that a friend of mine and a regular member of our audience who's here with us right now, Brian Petrie, finished his first book and sent it to the publisher. And I've got his book right here. It's called Help Me, Help You. And the subtitle is Get Your Mind Right. Help Me, Help You, Get Your Mind Right. This is a book that Brian wrote. This was released in March of 2020, but it was written well before COVID-19 hit. You can find it on Amazon if you're interested. I definitely recommend it. It's a good book. The reason I mention Brian's book is because he wrote about PPE before PPE was common language. And as Brian was writing about this very passage of scripture that we're going to look at in Ephesians chapter 6, Brian referred to the spiritual armor as PPE for your soul. So I got to give him credit for that. That he was ahead of the game in that. And in a chapter that he titled Manage Your Gear, Brian writes about how we need to gear up with the whole armor of God so that we can fight this invisible enemy on spiritual ground. Everywhere you look today, people are geared up to fight an invisible virus. They got the masks, they got the hand sanitizer, they got the toilet paper. I still haven't figured out why the need for toilet paper. But my question is, why don't we gear up for the most epic enemy of our lives? Why don't we gear up for that? Why aren't we ready for this battle? The one that could make an eternal difference, have an even greater, more significant impact on us. Well, before we gear up, the first thing we need to do is wake up. Number one, we need to wake up. That's the reason I've spent all this time comparing these two invisible forces. We need to wake up to the eternal battle that's going on around us all day, every day. Let me read to you from Ephesians chapter 6, beginning in verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. That's what we need to wake up to. There is the battle. And we have this enemy. But we also have, according to this verse, the resources that we need to fight this battle. We just have to wake up to it. Brian wrote this in his book, War is being waged against you every hour of every single day. You don't get to choose whether or not you will be involved in this fight. It is an inevitable part of life. You're a combatant whether you want to be or not. That's really good stuff, Brian. The last part of verse 11 refers to the wiles or the tricky schemes of the devil. Jesus told us a lot about our enemy. And I think that's part of waking up, is knowing who our enemy is. Jesus told us that our enemy's main purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to steal anything and everything that belongs to God, especially God's glory. And he wants to steal everything that God through Christ has given to you and I. If you've ever found yourself as a Christian in a joyless, down in the dumps state of being, I can assure you that it was the devil who stole your joy. Because that's what he does. He steals, but he also kills. He wants to kill everything and everyone that he can. He is behind every murder and massacre, including the murder of Jesus Christ. The devil is always the mastermind behind a massacre. He's also out to destroy. He wants to destroy your soul and that of your family, your friends, and your neighbors. He wants to destroy the church and every unborn child. He specializes in diversion, perversion, and trauma. And he's prepared to use every tactic, every scheme, every tool, every weapon in his arsenal. That's what I've been dealing with this week as I thought to myself, am I as concerned about the devil as he is about me? Am I as aware of what he's up to as he is as to what I'm up to? So before we get to our arsenal, before we get dressed up in the armor of God, we need to wake up. Number two, we also need to wise up. We need to wise up. Let me read to you from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. Verse 12 says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." Now that's not talking about heaven. That's talking about the spiritual world. Notice what it said. We are in a wrestling match. We're in a wrestling match. And doesn't it feel that way sometimes? We already know this because we already experienced this. Haven't you had times where you tossed and turned all night and were agitated and irritable all day? Well, I have too. And sometimes we can't figure out why we can't sleep or why we're so on edge during the day. Well, now you know. You're engaged in a wrestling match with a spiritual enemy. So we need to be alert to that, to wise up to that. Look, life isn't a playground. It's a battleground. And while you may think your enemy, your real enemy, is an upright Homo sapien with a face you know, a voice you recognize, and a weapon that he or she used against you that you can identify, your real enemy is a downright nasty, wicked, demonic spiritual being who's part of a hierarchy of evil that hides in the dark and attacks you from behind. That's who your real enemy is. You may think your enemy is a political party or an ugly, evil person therein. No. Magnify how ugly and evil you think they are times a billion. It's not flesh and blood. Your enemy is spiritual. It's time to wise up. These are spiritual forces of darkness that you and I cannot hide from. The only quarantine from the enemy of our soul is heaven itself. And so we need to wise up to that. We need to wise up to that. Number three, and this is what the passage repeats 3 times, we need to stand up. We need to stand up. Let me read to you from verse 11, 13, and 14, because they all 3 use the word stand. Verse 11, "Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." Verse 13, "Therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand." There it is again. And in verse 14, "Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness." So stand, withstand, stand, and stand. It's repeated over and over. And what this passage, what this word means, to stand, it doesn't mean to stand still. It means to stand firm. It means to stand strong. It means that we are to stand in resistance to the push of the enemy against us. If any of you have studied martial arts, which I haven't, but if any of you have studied martial arts, you know the importance of your stance. Your stance is very important. In fact, those who take martial arts seriously have become so accustomed to practicing a defensive stance that it becomes second nature to them. They do it all the time, no matter where they are, without realizing it. They're always in a defensive stance, ready for anything. In fact, you can walk up to someone who is deeply involved in martial arts and try to catch them off guard and give them a shove, and they won't budge. Why? Because they are always standing in resistance. That's how we're supposed to stand against the enemy of our soul. We need to be ready. We're to spend so much time in spiritual training, in battlefield praying, and in positioning ourselves firmly in Christ that we are not easily knocked down by the enemy. All right? So we need to stand up. Let's move quickly to our battlefield gear. We need, number 4, we need to suit up. We need to suit up. All right, thumbs up, confession time here. Thumbs up if this has happened to you yet. You walk all the way from a parking lot to the front door of a store or a building without your mask, and you have to take the walk of shame back to your vehicle to get your mask. Thumbs up if that's happened to you. My thumbs are up too, because it's happened to me. It's amazing. We will go to such great lengths for one invisible enemy, and yet we'll totally ignore the other one, the more lethal enemy. Paul, yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up there. I mean, it's just, we've all done the walk of shame. Paul gave the Ephesians the command to suit up, gear up, as Brian says in his book. And as I read these next verses, as I look at verses 13 through 17, I noticed some verbs there, some action words that are really important. I want you to pay attention as I read through verses 13 through 17. I want you to pay attention to these words: take up, take, girded, put on, and shod. Those are all verbs, all action words, things that we are to do. So listen, therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you'll be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. You see all those active words? These are things that we are supposed to do. You know, with COVID-19, you have to remember to get your mask. I had to remember this morning. Not that I need to wear it here in this house, but I had to bring it just in case I go somewhere in public. So we have to remember to put on our mask. We have to remember to take up our hand sanitizer. Well, in spiritual warfare, which occurs every hour of every day, you must put on the armor of God. With prayer, every day you need to put on each piece of this battle gear. Verse 14 gives us our first piece of battle gear. It talks about the belt of truth. The belt of truth. Obviously, a belt goes around the waist, right? And it holds everything in place. For the soldier, the belt of truth was that central area that held everything else together. Not just the clothing, but the weapons and everything else. Also, with the Roman soldiers, they typically wore an outer garment, an outer tunic, over their belt of truth, or their belt. And so what would happen when a soldier was ready to engage in battle, he would take that outer tunic, roll it up, and stuff it under his belt, so that he could be, if he needed to run, he could run without having to hitch up his manskirt. If he needed to fight, he could maneuver better with that tucked under his belt. It's kind of like, you know, if you've watched the old Westerns and there's a gunfight and one of the guys has on one of those long black coats, what does he do before the gunfight? He takes that lapel and he pushes his coat, his overcoat, behind his holster. Why? So that he can get to his gun and draw quicker. It's the same type of situation. And so what is it? It's a belt of truth. A belt of truth. The reason it's a belt of truth is because Satan is the father of lies. Satan attacks us with lies, with deception, with secrets, with whispers. That's his area. That's how he attacks. And so that's why you need truth, and that's why truth needs light. Truth needs light so that we can expose the darkness. You have to see what you're battling against, and that's where truth comes in. Folks,